Corn. Hello, Samantha. It's so great to see you again.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, I feel really fortunate that we connected, a while back and that you're on my advisory board. I actually did, kind of hunt you down and find a friend to connect us because I really, really
I
wanted
call
you to
that
be part of it.
persistence, and I appreciate that. Yes.
Yes, and especially since you are the queen of sending out, and cold calling and reaching out to people. So that's
Yes. That's my
um,
thing. I believe in cold contacting all the time and always telling you that.
yeah, I appreciate that. I think another thing that you really helped me with and you directed me, and I clearly need a lot more direction on this as well. I remember a conversation a while back where I was kind of telling you like all the things I'm doing and running in the household and trying to manage. And you kind of said, you shouldn't be taking care of all those things. Like you're running a business now and you're a CEO. And that really stuck with me. Then since then, I read the Drop the Ball by Tiffany Dufu, and I really took that in. Like, okay, what are my objectives? What should I be doing? What should I try and delegate? So, given
Yeah.
that, and then reading The Pie Life, I really want to get a better understanding of like how I think it's something that so many women grapple with, and how how to do that, how to kind of like figure out the different segments. Everyone asks about balance, and I kind of say, I don't know balance. I'm terrible at balance. I try and focus on like one thing that I want to get done that day. That's going to be my focus, and something else is going to fall by the wayside. So
Yeah, I mean, I think so much of it is, I've worked with thousands of women, and I believe that the most successful and fulfilled are those that allow themselves to be part of different areas of their life. And I think what's typical of, and I know you well enough to say, like, people like us who are somewhat A-type personalities and like to control things, what's typical of us is like, we sometimes will say, okay, if I'm just a wife and a mom, I'll be the best wife and best mom. Or if I just focus on, my work and working out, then everything will be great. And then I'll meet someone later. Right. And that's actually a classic error. But what I believe is that after working with all of these people, that you really need to be part of 7 slices of your life. And those are your career, your family, your relationship or your quest to find one, your hobbies, your health, your community, and your friends. And the idea is not that all of those slices are going to be equal, because they're not. But the idea is that you make goals for each of those slices so that they start existing, even if it's a sliver. So even if it's that, playing the guitar made you happy as a child and you're going to take a guitar lesson once a month, then suddenly your hobbies start existing again. And I think, one thing that's not part of the pie is guilt, because the most successful women do not spend any time in the guilt category. You just don't have time for it, right? Like there's no time in your day to feel guilty. You're too busy giving yourself to your career, to your family, to all the things that are important to you. And that just takes away precious time that you could be doing something productive with them.
yeah, but you feel like there has to be like a time, like different times for those different pieces of the pie. So, right, maybe you can't fit everything into every day or every week, but that you're gonna kind of maybe this week the focus has to be two or three of those pieces, and next week something else because it's just so hard to
I
fit it
really
all in.
don't know. I mean, like for me, for example, I try to get a number of steps each day. Okay. I live in Los Angeles, which is a very sedentary place. It's a car culture. Whenever you live in a suburb, it's hard to, get your steps in. When you're living in New York City, it's a lot easier. You're just walking as part of your daily life. You don't have to think a lot about it. Here, I have to be very, very intentional. So, this afternoon in the middle of my meetings, I will make time to go with a friend for a walk to make sure I get my exercise and see a friend at the same time. Or, this weekend on Saturday, my daughter had softball practice. So I made sure to listen to a podcast while I went for a walk while she had her practice. Like I try to make sure that like I marry a lot of the slices together. And that's definitely been helpful to me. But I also leave some room for spontaneity, right? Like a friend just texted that they're in town and can I meet for a glass of wine tonight? And I'll do it, right? Like even I'd rather leave the dirty dishes in the sink and go out for the margarita. And that's always kind of been my philosophy. I think that so often as women, we have this kind of surviving mentality as opposed to thriving. And this kind of relates back to the advice I'd given you when you first started your business, which is like, if you can outsource things, if you are, privileged enough to be able to afford a housekeeper or to afford someone to help you with some of the driving or whatever it is, outsource anything that won't impact your relationship with your family. So for me, I would rather spend time with my children than, cleaning the kitchen for an hour a day, which is what it would take when you have a family of five to clean up,
Yeah.
right? So when you can afford to outsource something, it's really worthwhile to do so, because you have to think of, what are you worth per hour? What could you be doing with that hour to move your business further and creating more value for your business and in turn your family?
Yeah. No, I totally appreciate that. One, I was waiting for the quote. I wanted the margarita quote about having a drink, having a margarita with a friend. Um, and I agree. I'm trying to shift also, like, what is the valuable time? So I'm someone who likes to check everything off my list. So it is after dinner when everyone else goes and they're playing a game together or watching a show. And I'm like, well, I just want to get the kitchen clean and be done with it and get it off the list. And but I am missing, the actual time and valuable time that that's way more fulfilling than me, you know, having the kitchen cleaned.
Right.
Um, but it's hard to change the mentality when you're, kind of always driven by the never ending to-do list.
It is. One of my tricks is to add things to your to-do list. So, for example, when you are a busy professional or a mom and you have this crazy day every day and no 2 days are the same, you end up with a lot of unexpected things that you have to put on your plate every day. And so I like to add those to my to-do list, because at the end of the day, when you haven't finished everything you've set out to do, you also look at all that you have done and you realize that you've actually accomplished a ton. So, if suddenly your kid's school calls and you have to, fill out a form, or you have to schedule a doctor's appointment or whatever it is, those things should end up on your to-do list, because you'll realize how much you have accomplished even on the days when you're not accomplishing everything that started out on your to-do
Yeah.
list.
There's always something unexpected. Like, I get a call from school when I'm supposed to be on a Zoom. My son left his iPad at home. So I have to run it to school because he needs it. So
Right.
yes, those things always come up. But I also appreciate, I know that well, first of all, you started a business to help women, especially women wanting to get back into the workforce, and giving them an option with place payments of something they can do. And I appreciate that. Kind of the advice you give is, not to leave your career or take time off, because it is very hard to get back. And I'm just curious what strategies though you would give people. So I'm someone who was out of the workforce for a long time. I actually, the first chapter of your book talks about, a corporate lawyer and leaving, and and how hard it is, but for me, I was on emergency bed rest with and end up with preemie twins, and I felt like that was the right decision, and I had to be there, and that just was a much longer time than expected. And I'm someone who never ever thought I would be out of. I think that's the the most surprising trajectory that I've taken in my life, is that I ended up home, um, raising my family, and I'm obviously very fortunate that I was able to do that. But it's a huge, it's very, very difficult to have a large gap in the resume and re-enter the workforce. And I know that you acknowledge that and show women that that is so hard and less fulfilling if they don't have all those pieces of their life. I'm
Well, I
wondering.
think, yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is that it's financially risky. And
Yeah.
so when you leave the workforce for just 2 years, there's less than a 50% chance you'll ever get a full-time position again for the rest of your life. And our lives are really long, and those baby years are really short, but the first 5 years, yes, but then your child goes to kindergarten and they're in school for most of the day. And then you want to go back and it becomes really difficult statistically. And so I always, advise women to at least keep their foot in the door after they have kids, because it puts them in a very financially vulnerable situation. More than half the time, something unexpected happens, a marriage doesn't work out, or there's a death or an injury, or your spouse loses their job. So, unfortunately, for most people, it doesn't work out the way they think it will or the way they expect. And one of the best ways to sort of bulletproof your family against financial vulnerability is to make sure that you continue to earn money throughout your life. Now, in terms of Park Place, I found when I was on the book tour for the Pie Life, I found that the one group of women I really couldn't help were the ones who'd already left the workforce, wanted to get back in, and found very few opportunities. And a lot of them had started selling kind of makeup and skincare and essential oils to their friends and found themselves not even making martini money. A lot of them aren't even breaking even because the way those companies work is someone's always left holding the bag at the end. So I had a front row seat to this industry most people don't know much about, which is the credit card processing industry. It's basically what makes it so that when you go into a business and pay for your haircut or your meal, it makes it safe to transact the credit cards. There's this middleman between Amex, MasterCard, Visa, and the actual business. And I saw that there were very few women, very few people of color in the industry, and it wasn't a very complex thing to sell. And I thought, what if I could train this group of people who've been sidelined and feel like their only opportunity is multi-level marketing companies? What if I could recruit and train them to sell credit card processing to their local business, their kids pediatrician and their yoga studio and all of the business owners in their community. And so that is how Park Place started. And now we have over 1,000 account executives in all 50 states, and we train everyone for free. There's no way to lose money with Park Place. And we've really built a community out of our account executives. And so we're really focused on the sort of technological part of that right now in terms of building that out. And we're super excited about it.
Yeah. And that's amazing to give women the opportunity. I do think, you know, one, you have to see that there's like a door that can be opened. And I'm also wondering kind of how you would counsel, since I know generally you counsel not to leave, but, you know, at least I hope to inspire or show other women that even if you do have a gap in the resume, one, that you didn't lose the skills that you acquired before you were home, and that you actually gained other skills. Like there are skills you learn from, I had preemie twins and a third, and I can multitask like the best of them, or learning
I
flexibility. We
have a
talked about how
feeling that you
every
could
day.
multitask before you had them, knowing you. But I think, listen, I think that there's a confidence that typically we lose when we've been out for a certain amount of time. Because unfortunately, now the world changes at such a rapid clip. Like you might have had a marketing job and you missed Twitter, right? Or like there's so many things that change so fast. And so one of the things that we do is we build the confidence back by offering sort of workshops on professional skills, how to have a LinkedIn bio that looks professional, and how to talk about your story, how to tell your story. There's a lot of sort of softer skills that get lost in those years. And so I think one of the most important things is to build back your confidence. And so talk to other women who have returned, talk to other people who are successful, even if they've never left, and start spending time with them and get their advice and get them on your team in terms of helping you find that next opportunity and building back your confidence. Because I think it's natural when you haven't done something in a while, if you're an athlete and you haven't played the sport in a while, you don't have the same confidence going back onto the field or the court as you used to.
I totally agree with that, because I mean, there's a lot of self-doubt that goes on, and you feel like you have to really earn the credibility going back in, um, and feel like you kind of have to make up for that, gap in the resume. But I do think there's a lot of skill out there, and untapped skill, and that if we can bring it back into the workforce, and show people. And I do think things change quickly. Listen, I went back in, social media didn't exist when I left, and I had to learn everything from just how to post a story, right? It was completely new. And so I do
Luckily,
think,
there's YouTube videos for everything.
exactly, there's ways to get up to speed though. And I think it is connecting. There's a couple of things. It's connecting with people who can guide you. And I love that you are, a firm believer in just reaching out, finding people who you think can help, and reaching out to them. And I also think there is so much information out there that you really can, if you want to, do your due diligence and research and learn about an area, you can. It's available, and there are, resources out there.
Absolutely. One of the things that I notice as a huge challenge for a lot of people is how they tell their stories. And I think just getting comfortable telling your story is so important. And one of the biggest mistakes I see stay-at-home parents make is someone will meet them, whether it's at a school event or at the playground or, a dinner party, and say, okay, so what do you do? And they say, oh, I'm at home with my kids, which is a conversation ender, right? But imagine if you said, well, I was in human resources for 10 years, and for the last couple, I've been home with my kids. That totally changes how that person sees you. And then they're going to say, oh, well, where were you working in HR? And then suddenly it becomes a different conversation. And if you decide to go back a year or two later, or 2 months later, and you connect with that person, they remember you as the HR mom, right? They don't remember you as just a mom. And I think that we do ourselves a disservice when we don't share our backgrounds. And that is part of who you are. It's part of your story, and they're all important aspects to you.
I think that's a really good tip, actually. And I think just looking back, I think it's something that I probably did not do as much, and there's this whole world before being home with kids that I probably didn't tell them, oh, I'm a former attorney at a big law firm or did corporate strategy or
Exactly.
whatever. Like, probably they mentioned I probably only talked about currently, my volunteer work or,
Right.
charitable boards or things like that I would discuss, but not kind of, it maybe didn't seem pertinent at the time. But I think that's important to kind of show the whole person
The 3D
and to
version of who you
understand
are.
me.
Yeah.
Exactly. You have to kind of understand that whole, um,
Yeah. And I mean,
that
the
part of
irony
life.
of the social media thing is that in many ways, social media has made it easier for people to return, because kind of what we were talking about earlier, like it's given you access to everyone. No one is inaccessible. You don't have to call someone's company and talk to their secretary and get through to them. I mean, you can really reach out to everyone. I'll never forget how I became friends with Sally Krawcheck, who started Elevate Network. But
Amazing.
you know, she and I became Twitter friends, and I started commenting on her tweets, and now that would probably be an Instagram situation where, it's really easy to give someone social media love or social media currency, right? You start commenting, you start liking. If someone goes to Inspire Tequila and starts commenting on all your posts, you are going to feel an affinity for that person without even realizing why. You're almost tricked into thinking you know them. So by the time they contact you and ask for advice or a job, you already really like that person because they're like an Uber fan of you or Inspiro, right? And so I think that that is the kind of thing that we can now do easily because of social media. You can truly get to anyone through all of these mediums, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. There's so many ways to approach people.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And I think, um, I personally love LinkedIn because I'm not as great at
Me
like
too.
Instagram and Facebook. And I actually, I think especially any woman wanting to get back into the workforce or kind of like, I feel like you can get a little more tapped into what's going on, following people, seeing, what people are saying, connecting with former coworkers, bosses, everyone by getting on there. So I think that's a great way to get started also is to set up your own LinkedIn profile. I know I always ask you for advice on
Absolutely.
mine because I still think it needs a lot of work, but
Yes, and don't
um,
be as critical of your own LinkedIn profile as you are.
um, yes, but it's trying to figure out what you should add, what story you should tell, and things like that. But I do think, and I think I also originally considered it having to be really like formal. And now what I see people put up on there and post, it doesn't have to be these
It's
like
changed a
formal
lot. I
headshot
will, yeah,
pictures with like specific business advice or learnings. I mean, people put a lot of, information up there that is just engaging and
yeah,
interesting. Um,
yeah. It's definitely changed a lot.
yeah, so I'm personally a big fan. I have not got on, I need to start getting on Twitter more. Um, not really
I
engaged on
don't think
Twitter.
it's necessary for your business. I don't think it's gonna necessarily. I think you should be focused on LinkedIn and Instagram. And I think that's also the thing is like understanding where each one takes you, right? Because each of the social media outlets is totally different in terms of who their audience is and why you use them. So I think
Right.
it's important.
I think there's a lot of learnings. Like I just am,
Mhm.
you know, we've talked about this. It's that, I like to learn all the time, learn it all,
Yes.
don't know it all. So for me, I think on Twitter, there are some people who just put up really great like business learnings and advice.
Yes,
Like,
that's true.
Alex Lieberman from Morning Brew. I follow him. Like I think he does great stuff. So I think there's a wealth of information just to learn from.
Yep.
So
Yeah, that's
um,
true.
But well, I appreciate it. And I think everything you do and everything you do to help and support women, and especially to try and like guide them and give them a path to re-enter. Because listen, I don't think that the path for everyone's going to be starting their own company like what I did. It's just not feasible. It's not realistic. But I think there are so many different paths to just getting back in. And I think it's a great way. I actually just recommended to a friend recently divorced and hasn't been in the workforce. I said, oh, here's a good option that you should look at.
Yeah. Well, one
So
of the things we do at Park Place is like we call everyone account executives from the very beginning because we want to be able to fill that gap in your resume so that if you do want to return to a more corporate position, you are an account executive at a financial services company, which obviously looks like a much more legit position than me, a consultant at a makeup or clothing company.
yeah,
So yeah. Yeah.
no, I appreciate it. Well, thank you.
All right. Thank
It was
you.
great talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.